one event is the Bhagavatam verse, and the other event is the disappearance day of Srila Prabhupada. And this article brings the two together. And so we can chant the verse, and I'll read the translation and a few more translations till we get to our first purport, and then I'll read that article, and I think you'll find it quite interesting. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. We're in the 6th canto, which is entitled Prescribed Duties for Mankind. And we're in, I forget, what is the 2nd chapter? Yeah. Jamil delivered by the Vishnu Dutas, and we're in text 29. Soham vyaktam patishyami narake brishadarune dharmagna kamino yatra vindanti yamayatana Soham vyaktam patishyami Nadake brishadarune Dharmagna kamino yatra Vindanti yamayatana. Would anyone like to chant? Nadake Prishadarune Dharmagna Kamino Yatra Soham Vyaktam Patishyami
Narake Brishadarune Dharmagna Kamino Yatra Vidanti Yamayatanaha.
Ladies.
Soham Vyaktam Patishyami
Soham Vyaktam Patishyami
Narake Brishadarune
Narake Brishadarune
Dharmagna Kamino Yatra
Dharmagna Kamino Yatra Vedanti Yamayatana. Soham Vyaktam Patishyami Narake Brishadarune Dharmagna Kamino Yatra Vedanti Yamayatana. Soham Vyaktam Patishyami Narake Brishadarune Dharmagna Kamino Yatra Vedanti Yamayatana. Saha, such a person. I. Vyaktam, it is now clear. patishyami, will fall down, narake, in hell, brishadarune, most miserable, dharmagnaha, they who break the principles of religion, kaminaha, who are too lusty, yatra, where, vindanti, undergo, yamayatanaha, the miserable conditions imposed by Yamaraj. So, translation to this. It is now clear that as a consequence of such activities, it is now clear that as a consequence of such activities, a sinful person like me must be thrown into hellish conditions meant for those who have broken religious principles and must there suffer extreme miseries. No purport, I'll just read the translation to the next. Was this a dream I saw, or was it reality? I saw fearsome men with ropes in their hands coming to arrest me and drag me away. Where have they gone? And where have those 4 liberated and very beautiful persons gone who released me from arrest and saved me from being dragged down to the hellish regions? Purport. As we have learned from the descriptions in the 5th canto, the hellish planets are situated in the lower portions of the universe. Therefore, they are called Adho Bhuvaha. Ajamila could understand that the Yamadutas had come from that region. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnanam Jana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So Ajamil just had a very intense experience. Yamadutas came to drag him to hell, and it was quite terrified. It was very terrifying, and it is a very terrifying event. Now the interesting thing is that my sister's a nurse. Do you know what a nurse is? Yeah. Okay, how do you say in German? Oh, too difficult. I'll learn that next time. There is a medical term, and don't do it now, but later on, if you want, you can look it up. It's a technical medical term called terminal restlessness. Terminal refers to that which is at the end, meaning life, and restlessness is the discomfort and a delirious behavior of people at the time of death. And what's interesting, when you read these descriptions, they very much correspond to the descriptions that the Vedic literature gives of a person who's being dragged to hell by Yamadutas. It's actually a very terrifying experience, and there's reports how people are seeing other horrible creatures around them, how they're tying them with ropes, and even though they might be completely emaciated and incapable for days, they have been incapable of moving at all. But at this point, they're jumping off of the bed and trying to hide and this, that, and begging and screaming. And in the medical world, they ascribe this to just a delirious state because the body parts are starting to break down, malfunction, and therefore there's all kinds of issues. That's what they say. However, I will read to you. This is the experience. Some of you might have read this. This is an account of one Mataji when her father was passing away, and her daughter was with her, and her daughter saw the Yamadutas. And anyhow, I'll just read the article. That'll be this morning's lecture, and it's also a very nice glorification of Srila Prabhupada and appreciation of what Srila Prabhupada has to offer. Have you ever heard of terminal restlessness? Probably not, unless you're a doctor or a nurse, but although the name is new, the conditions described in Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada says, quote, and similarly, miserable condition of death, when one is dying, lying in coma, so many suffering is going on, so many dreaming. The Yamaduta is coming. Sometimes the man on the deathbed cries. Here's so much suffering, but there is no remedy. Everyone is helpless. So that is the miserable condition of death, from a lecture Prabhupada gave in India. I will tell you how I found out about it, and this story is a classic example of the dreadful reality faced by all suffering souls of this material world. It also shows clearly what Srila Prabhupada has saved us from and why we should feel eternally indebted to him. It all started when I received a phone call from my parents saying that Dad was sick with cancer. I believe in omens, and my right eye started twitching profusely, so I knew that the outcome would not be good. That was in the beginning of November. My dad was optimistic. He was sure he could overcome everything, as he had always been the controller in every situation and had faced many trials in life and overcame them all. Until now, he seemed to be a lucky guy, enjoying good facilities and good karma in every respect. Little did he know that his good karma had come to a grinding halt. If Krishna wants to save you, no one can kill you. But if Krishna wants to kill you, no one can save you. Dad had prostate cancer, and it had spread into his bones. He was having chemotherapy, but it failed twice. I rang one day, and he literally wept. I'm dying, he said. I felt compassion for him. He was helpless in the hands of cruel fate. I tried to help. Well, don't worry, I said. There is reincarnation. You will be okay. Just pray. God is kind. But it was little comfort to someone who was bewildered and did not know God. After that, I felt that I was somehow connected to his suffering. I could feel all of his fear and anxiety. I would pray all the time. I didn't want to experience any of it. But I guess I was karmically connected to him, so there was no escape, no matter how far I was. The physical suffering was nothing compared to the mental torture he was experiencing. He became humble, and I dropped everything. A couple of times and flew from Vrindavan to be with him. In the past, he had never wanted to hear anything about Krishna, so I had given up trying years ago. Whenever discussed the subject, I would just feed him prasadam, he loved my cooking, and talk about other things. I had Vrindavan dust with me and some Yamuna water mixed with Ganga. There were also some small Jagannath deities. I deposited all these things in the house, hoping they would have an effect and use them whenever possible, in Dad's food and so on. I kept praying and hoping that somehow I could convince him about Krishna before he died. He was so bewildered and humbled by his lack of control over the situation that he was willing to listen to some degree. He was clutching at straws. You know what it means to clutch at straws? When you're desperate and you just grab onto anything. So clutch at straws, like think if you're falling down and you're trying to grab onto a straw, it's like so similarly, when your world is falling apart, you seek solace anywhere. You'll try anything. I read him some Bhagavad Gita, and he said that it was comforting. I also read him from Coming Back. He liked that because the idea of reincarnation was something positive to look for in the future, and he was desperate for that. I saw in there the chapter about Ajamila and felt I should read it to him, but thought maybe it was too much to thrust upon him. Besides, I was there, And because I was chanting, everything will be okay, or so I thought. I really believed you could just chant Hare Krishna and all bad things would go away. I guess this is a superficial and neophyte viewpoint. The material world is such a heavy place, and with my great ego, I was overestimating my own purity. I realized later that I'm really not even a devotee. If you're incapable of saving yourself, how can you possibly save anyone else? I had to fly back to Vrindavana several times, as I had family and business commitments, but the whole time I could feel him pulling me. I had zero mental peace during this time. I think he really wanted me there and was emotionally dependent on me, as I was the only one offering any tangible solutions. People are basically not sympathetic, People are basically not sympathetic either, and he needed a lot of understanding. I'm not good at handling suffering, so this was difficult to bear, seeing someone you care for suffering so much anxiety. I left my Jagannath deities there and asked them to forgive any offense, but to please protect my father while I went back to India on business just for a couple of weeks. Then my mother rang. She was at her wit's end. Please come, she said. He is in hospital now and we need you here. I jumped on the first flight, and as soon as I arrived, I moved into the hospital with Dad. It was incredible how Krishna seemed to arrange it. They gave us a private room and let me sleep there and care for him. Nobody questioned my authority, and my mother just backed off and let me do anything. She's a Roman Catholic and doesn't usually allow me to speak about Krishna. I realized that the karmis are so far into denial that they try to avoid the reality of death as much as possible. So it was a way out for her if I took the burden. So she could go home and pretend nothing was happening, yet still know that Dad was being taken care of by me. Or maybe deep down she also felt desperate for his spiritual welfare, and I was the best solution they had. I'm not really sure. Once it all goes beyond their material perception and control, they become completely bewildered. I only know that I was able to fully take over the care of my father. Many people must suffer and die alone in hospitals going through what I'm about to tell you. I slept next to Dad and tended to his every need. I managed to get tulasi beads on him, which one demoniac nurse kept taking off. I got mental about it. Oh no, I thought, he's so sinful. He can't wear tulasi. Then I just got in this mindset that I was going to be aggressive and keep those beads on him no matter what. She would take them off and I would just smile sweetly and put them right back on. I read some Bhagavad Gita to him. He didn't eat at all for the 12 days leading up to his death. For 8 of those days he had only Ganga and Yamuna water and nothing else. I controlled everything that went into his mouth. I even started sprinkling Vrindavan dust in his water as well. Toward the end, he was on another level, not of this world. He seemed to be perceiving things that other people could not. For example, every night I would put on a Shiva t-shirt to wear to bed. There was a large picture of Lord Shiva on the front of it. My habit was to wait till he was asleep and in a suitable manner sprinkle a little bit of Vrindavan dust on his head in case he died while I was asleep. One night, I had just sprinkled the dust and he sprang up with a wide-eyed look of amazement. "Oh, you are surrounded by dust," he said. On another night, in the same way, he sprang awake and looked at my Lord Shiva's shirt. "Careful," he said, "there is fire coming out of your shirt." The day before he died, he said there were big dogs in the room and an ugly person floating outside the window. The evening before his death, he began to feel disturbed. "Untie my legs," he was saying to I don't know whom, and he was visibly distressed. My mother and my daughter decided to stay overnight at the hospital, which they did not normally do. I drifted off to sleep, and so did Mom. At about 9:30 p.m., my daughter woke up. "Mom," she said, "come quickly. Something is happening to Granddad." I raced over to the bed, and Dad was moaning. "Please, please," he was saying, "I beg you, let me loose. Please let me loose." His tone was humble and terrified, and his eyes were lowered. He was to say these words many, many, many times over the next 6 hours. He was trying to jump off the bed and hide under his pillow. You have to understand that he was skin and bones. He couldn't even urinate without help. And here he was suddenly trying to get up and run off. He was thrashing around like a madman. You know what it means to thrash? It's like when you take fish out of water and you put it on the ground and it thrashes, it flaps around. So that's what it means to thrash, like kicking legs and arms. And he was thrashing around like a madman. This is really inauspicious, I thought. I grabbed him by the shoulders. "Dad," I said, "what's happening? Are you okay?" He was terrified. "Oh, Sue." Sue's the legal name of this Mataji. He was terrified. "Oh, Sue," he cried out. "I tried to get away. I really did, but they got me." His voice went up to a shout. "She's got me," he yelled out. At that time, I should have realized what was happening, but the fact that he said, "she has got me," put me off. And somehow I got covered over, and for the next 6 hours, I just tried to comfort him. He cried out again and again. "Oh, for God's sake," he would shout, "just let me rest. Just 10 minutes, please, I beg you." His tone of voice was terrified, and all the while humble and begging. I would chant, and he would relax a little. Then a nurse would come and distract me, and he would start again, thrashing and begging. "What's wrong?" I asked. He seemed exasperated. "I'm trying to tell you," he said, "but I just can't." Then at 3 a.m., it suddenly dawned on me that the Yamadutas had him. It was so obvious, and I felt so foolish for not realizing it until now. I turned to my 13-year-old daughter and told her I thought the Yamadutas had him. "Yes," she said, "I know. I woke you up because I saw 3 of them floating above his bed, and he was cowering and looking up." You know what it means to cower? Like, to cower means when you're in fear, then you're trying to hide from fear. That's cowering. She had actually seen them. She described later how they looked, with boar-like tusks coming upward out of their mouths and glaring eyes. She had thought they were some kind of ghosts trying to steal the soul from his body. Of course, by Krishna's arrangement, my mother was sleeping, oblivious the whole time. This is what happens when you're dying. You're going to hell and everyone is just like, "Are you okay?" "No, I'm not okay." What to do, I thought. I started to pray to Krishna. By the way, this Prabhupada said this many times. But until you know what he's really saying, I've heard it. What to do, I thought. I started to pray to Krishna. "Oh, please let him go, Krishna," I was begging. Then Super Soul would answer, "Why?" He would say, he will only offend again." Then I was really upset. I started praying to Yamaraj, "Please, Yamaraj." And all the while I was chanting. I told Dad I was sorry I hadn't realized sooner that they had hold of him. He nodded, traumatized. His whole death experience was hellish. "I'm sorry that only I'm sorry that any souls have to experience such a thing, and understand now why Srila Prabhupada felt such urgency to save everyone. Dad, I said, do you want me to hold you and chant? Yes, yes, he said. Have they still got you? No, they let me go. Then I held him tight for the next 3 hours, and he slowly gave up his life. Through his mouth, which is a very important detail, peacefully with me chanting right in his ear and dripping Ganga and Yamuna water into his mouth. I stayed fully focused on chanting very close to his ear until he breathed his last at 6 a.m. It went straight out of his mouth and his eyes just closed. Poor him, cruel, cruel, hellish material world. It had been only 7 months from the start of his illness, and the 71-year story of his life was forcibly ended. While he would be thrashing and crying out, "Let me loose," I'd ask the nurse what was happening. "Oh, that is normal," they'd say. "He's just fighting it, and it happens to everyone." There's even a term for it. It's called terminal restlessness, and they give nurses seminars about how to deal with it. Well, I've got news for you folks. It's actually terminal yamadutadness. Of course, they're advised, the nurses, to just pump them full of morphine and ignore all their ramblings. Another thing is that no one is meant to know about it. It was purely Krishna's mercy that we were able to realize it, and even then I almost missed it. For 6 hours I was confused, and yet Dad was telling me quite clearly and begging for help. So some sort of Maya is covering the whole thing, and people aren't aware of it. Only the person who's going through it is aware of it. Mention is made of the dogs. A devotee told me afterwards that they were reading Yamaraja's scriptures, which gave detailed descriptions, and it is said that the hounds of hell, you know hounds, those are like particular dogs, yeah? Hounds of hell come ahead several days before and sniff out where the rascals are dying. There was also the fact that he said, "She's got me." Apparently the Yamadutas have their own society with wives, kids and everything. Since they're also living entities in this material world, they are born into that society. I don't usually put pen to paper, as I don't feel at all qualified to do so, but Mother Radha Kunda Devi Das encouraged me and said that this experience should be shared with all the devotees. So please excuse my shortcomings. I'm not philosophical or academic. Here are some of Srila Prabhupada's comments on the subject from a lecture Prabhupada gave in Denver. To see Yamadutas, or the carriers of order of Yamaraj, superintendent of death, to see face to face at the time of death, when one very sinful man is dying, he sees the Yamaraj or the order carriers of Yamaraj. They are very fierce looking. Sometimes the man on the deathbed becomes very much fearful, cries, "Save me, save me." From a lecture Prabhupada gave in Vrindavan. But you take this mission and go everywhere, in every corner. I'm thankful to you. You're already doing that in Europe and America. People are deep asleep because people are sleeping under misguidance, and they're becoming candidate for being carried away by the Yamadutas. This is not the position of the whole world. Yamaduta will not excuse you. However, you may be very proud of becoming independent. This is not possible. To save the human civilization, the rascal civilization that, quote, "there is no life after death and you go on enjoying as much as you like," this wrong civilization is a killing civilization. So you save them. Otherwise, the Yamaduta is there. Another quote from another lecture Prabhupada gave in Vrindavan. This man was like this, and he must be carried to Yamaraj for punishment. Why punishment? No, to make him purified. It is said punishment is required. This is nature's law. Just like if you have infected some disease, the punishment is you must suffer for it. The punishment is good. If you have infected some disease and when you suffer, that means you become purified from the disease. Suffering is not bad, to become purified. Therefore, when a devotee suffers, he does not like it. He thinks that he does not take it ill. Excuse me. He thinks that I'm being purified. I'm being purified. Now, Mataji is continuing with the article. So I suppose that even though Dad had tulasi beads on, he was a good man by ordinary standards, but he liked to hunt, and he had been a drinker, womanizer, and cow eater. And even though he had had all facilities for the last 28 years, he did not surrender to Krishna. Even at the time of death, he didn't seem able to think of Krishna as the solution to his woes. Woes means problems. Srila Prabhupada sums it up in the purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 6.2.49, quote, "At the time of death, one is certainly bewildered because his bodily functions are in disorder. At that time, even one who throughout his life has practiced chanting the holy name of the Lord may not be able to chant the Hare Krishna mantra very distinctly. Nevertheless, such a person receives all the benefits of chanting the holy name. While the body is fit, therefore, why should we not chant the holy name of the Lord loudly and distinctly? If one does so, it is quite possible that even at the time of death, he will be properly able to chant the holy name of the Lord with love and faith." Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 6.2.15, quote, "Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. If one practices chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, he is naturally expected to chant Hare Krishna when he meets with some accident. Even without such practice, however, if one somehow or other chants the holy name of the Lord Hare Krishna, when he meets with an accident and dies, he will be saved from hellish life after death. One is immediately absolved from having to enter hellish life, even though he is sinful." Because that's what was happening to Jamila. It was sinful, but he just uttered the name of the Lord. In the purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 6.2.7, quote, "The Yamadutas had considered only the external situation of a Jamila. Since he was extremely sinful throughout his life, they thought he should be taken to Yamaraj and did not know that he had become free from the reactions of all sins. The Vishnudutas therefore instructed that because he had chanted the 4 syllables of the name Narayana at the time of his death, he was freed from all sinful reactions." In the same purport, Srila Prabhupada quotes the following verses. "Simply by chanting one holy name of Hari, a sinful man can counteract the reactions to more sins than he is able to commit," from Brihad Vishnu Purana. Another from Garuda Purana. "If one chants the holy name of the Lord, even in a helpless condition or without desiring to do so, all the reactions of a sinful life depart, just as when a lion roars, all the small animals flee in fear," from Skanda Purana. "By once chanting the holy name of the Lord, which consists of the 2 syllables Hari, one guarantees his path to liberation. I can only hope and pray that somehow my father had a small thought of Krishna because of my feeble efforts and the causeless mercy of Guru and Gauranga. Anyway, I would like the feedback of all the devotees. Do others have similar experiences to tell? What do you all think about this topic? Please, all of you Vaishnavas, pray for my father that he may have an opportunity to serve Krishna. I was thinking myself to be a big hero, going to save my father, only to find that I'm just a big bag of hot air zero. I'm such a fallen rascal that I couldn't help him in his hour of need, and I hope this story helps others to advance their efforts in Krishna consciousness so that we can all help Srila Prabhupada in his mission to relieve all the sufferings of the fallen conditioned souls." Hare Krishna. Pretty intense. I mean, I thought I was gonna just tell the story, but I didn't think it would be as convincing as these are the words of this Mataji who wrote this shortly after it happened, fresh in her memory and so on. And we know we will also forget. You may know this phenomenon called Smashan Vairagya. Do you know what Smashan Vairagya is? No one knows. Okay. Smashan Vairagya. Smashan is the burning ghat, place where you burn dead bodies. And so Smashan Vairagya is renunciation. Yeah, and it's an interesting phenomenon when people go, and I don't know if you've ever seen a human body burn. Like once I was in Jagannath Puri, I went there I wanted to see it. And you watch, and very interesting thoughts come to mind. You're thinking, what's the value of life? Here it is in front of you, the great body being burnt, and when you see, graphic details, I'm not going to tell you because we're in the temple and one's considered contaminated by actually, unless one's a Brahmana, that's by tradition. So I'll spare you the details at this point. But you have these elevated thoughts as to what's the purpose of life, and then you start to think about life seriously. And then you go home and you continue to think, and then, there's the dinner, and then your kids are saying something, and there's something on TV, then you read something, the cell phone rings, and little by little you forgot all about it. But while you were there and while you were under the impression, you experienced vairagya or renunciation from mundane engagements. But then it's, Prabhupada said, like the curved tail of a dog. Dog's tail is never straight. You can make it straight. You take it by two ends, and as long as you're holding it, it's straight. The moment you let go, it just curls back up. So that's a little bit like that is our situation. I guess I'll say it. I was a temple president when we hosted a couple, husband and wife, devotees, who were medical practitioners, doctors, and they were in San Diego on training, because in San Diego there was this world famous hospice. Hospice is a hospital where you go to die. You don't go there to come back. You don't go there to get healthy. People go there who know they can't be healed anymore. So they go there to die, and then people help them die, in painless ways. And yeah, it's one of the best in the world. And they even study, like Giriraj Swami gave lectures there, which then which then he published in a book. I forget the title of the book. Final something, yeah. Final exam. I think you're right. See, now I'm doubting it. It's because it's been a while, but I think you're right, yeah. Why? Because in this hospice, they were so good at their job that they would want to know the cultural background of every individual that came to die there, so they could know how to relate to that person better. And so in terms of Hinduism, they and people of Hindu traditions, they actually invited us, and we had Giriraj Swami make presentations there. And so this couple was there for education. Why? Because they got a job. Giriraj Swami opened a hospice in Vrindavan. And these two devotees were to head up the staff of the hospice, where they would assist devotees to pass away from this world in the best possible manner. And I met this devotee some years later in Vrindavan. And we went on parikrama, read some Srimad Bhagavatam, and talked, and I asked him about his service, and I mentioned the terminal restlessness, and he told me that even some devotees exhibit the symptoms of terminal restlessness. He says, rarely, but some. And because he knows what it is, he found it terrifying. So I didn't ask him whether that's happening in the holy place, because hospice is in Vrindavan. But that's what he said. So I'm not saying this to freak anyone out, but it goes along with something what this Mataji said. Like, she was chanting there, but it wasn't enough, Like, he had to say it, or he had to get into it. He had to really want to hear it, and then things were changing, like that. I mean, if we were to take anything from the statement of that devotee, and that is that you can't be just a devotee in name only. Like, should be a devotee out of your own volition and like that. Anyhow, also sort of appropriate verse for this day, the Discipline's Day of Srila Prabhupada, because I don't know, maybe just because it was the days when I joined this movement, but I cannot think of anything else. It's hard for me to think of any other dimension of Srila Prabhupada. I mean, I'm capable of thinking of other dimensions, but this one dimension of Srila Prabhupada's persona is way too prominent in my head that it's totally dominating everything else. And that is Srila Prabhupada's a missionary. That's... Just finish and then I'll continue, no problem. No, fine, I'm not. Prabhupada coming to the West, now we meet him. Who's Prabhupada? Prabhupada came to spend his whole life thinking how to serve the mission of his guru. And that's all he did. And there were other people along the way who came from parallel societies who said that Prabhupada was a neophyte. There's horrible things to say. While they themselves were full of material desires and thing of that nature. But that's who we came to know as Srila Prabhupada, someone who came with a mission and told and begged us, practically, you take up this mission and carry it on. And then, when we're covered over by illusion, then we think, yeah, life is okay. Life is not okay. Life is okay in the sense that it's a great opportunity that you can squander or you can take advantage of. And that's a great message Krishna consciousness has to offer to the world. That life is not a meaningless phenomenon, but there's a great meaning, great value to life, and it's a shame not to take advantage of it. Way more than a shame, way more than a mere shame. So anyhow, I'm going to continue this talk about Srila Prabhupada in the evening. So, Om Tat Sat. Are there any questions or comments, perhaps? Yes.
We hear now from people who die, who know how that they will die, and they have this time to prepare. But often people are also dying instantly.
Yeah.
So when they die instantly, when this fight, this dermatitis is coming right after?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, because obviously in the case of the father of this Mataji, they were there before he died. But they could be there right after, I don't know. My father passed away like that. It's just, I don't feel good. Then he sat down and he was dead. Like, what just happened? It's a real shock. He was my age. Quite healthy too, like very healthy. And it just, time was up.
Might it be an advantage to know that you have time to prepare?
Yeah. I mean, in some sense, we all know. Just don't know exactly when. I mean, there's an interesting statement in the Bhagavad Gita that one becomes self-realized by yoga balena. Bala means strength, and yoga means practice. Yoga means different things, but in that context means practice. And that's a statement of the Bhagavad Gita, which is then amplified by Srila Prabhupada, that you have to build up your strength, your spiritual strength, by practice. And so whether you know when you're going to die or not, I mean, it is in some ways a blessing if you know, but nevertheless the business remains the same. And if you, namely, have to practice Krishna consciousness to build up that strength, and if you're thinking that, I have time, so, no rush, because I've been told I'm going to pass away at the age of 128 years. So I'll wait at least till 120th year. But what we find happening is that they have this saying in India, I don't know if you heard this, in India they say that, it's a colloquial saying, that that spiritual life is for old people. But what happens is, I don't know if you have this expression in German. In English they say there is no fool like an old fool. You see, old fool is someone who's become a super fool by being foolish his whole life, And so if you're foolish your whole life and you think you're going to become a maestro, do you know what maestro? That's Italian, but in German, you probably understand. Yeah. Going to be a spiritual maestro, then you're wrong. And we see, those of us who practice Krishna consciousness, that depending on the nature of our condition, it takes some time and effort. So, no need to make such calculations. And if you make such calculations, it indicates you're in Maya. Yes.
I would like to ask you if you could share, maybe you had some experience with devotees or other people who was dying.
Yeah, I actually do. I have. There was a sannyasi in ISKCON that hardly anyone knew. He was so humble. Interesting. And he never left Bombay. Like, even some devotees in India didn't know of him. Very unassuming, just naturally very humble individual. I liked him a lot. Somehow or other I like unassuming people. There's something impressive about it to me. That's the people I noticed the first. Narmada Swami. He was in charge of the book room of the BBT warehouse in Bombay. That was his service. It was just with the BBT. Don't know exactly what else was he doing at the BBT. But he was passing away. And while he was passing away, he was in Vrindavan. And still, not many devotees knew. Like, this almost seems to be like his thing, And I went to his deathbed, And later on I found out that he passed away a few days later. There was few of us who went there, and I couldn't recognize him. Like I've been to India, God knows how many times, and every time I was in Bombay, I saw him, and I couldn't recognize him. Like he had long hair and beard because he was laying down, and he was white, he was transparent, looked very clean, super clean, but thin, like super thin. And he had this fantastic smile. You couldn't take the smile away from his face. Very charming. And then we sang Vrindavana Mahimamrita. Do you know that song? Jaya Radhe, Jaya Krishna, Jaya. And then you go, it's a meditation on Vrindavan Dham, you know. He was crying in ecstasy. Tears. And then before we left, we recited in Sanskritam because he knew Sanskritam. We recited in Sanskritam the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Do you know what's the topic of the 8th chapter? It's the title of the 8th chapter is Attaining the Supreme. It speaks about, the topic of it is how to attain the Supreme, and how if you pass away under certain conditions, you go there, and if you pass under other conditions, you go there. And then at the end says, but if you're a devotee, it doesn't matter. You can pass away in any circumstances. And we recited that to them, and his hand was going like this, and then we were brahmacharis, so we went there and we put our heads, next to his bed, and he could barely move, and he, tapped us on the head. Then there was another devotee who, I wasn't there when he was passing away, but actually I don't think I ever seen anyone. Oh, actually I did, I was a soldier. I've seen people murdered. See, I forgot all about that. Actually, I've seen a lot of people die. You may remember this devotee. His service for years was to cook for the deities at the Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan. And then when he became so old that he couldn't cook, his service was to distribute Charanamrita during the morning program at the Darshan Arati. If you went to Vrindavan during those years, and there was quite a few years, you probably have gotten some Charanamrita from him. And then at one point he couldn't do that either, so he was just laying in his room, waiting to... Prabhupada told him, you should never leave Krishna Balaram temple. And he never did. He took that literally. Once I was told that he went just to Yamuna, through the Goshala, went to Yamuna and took bath and came back. But otherwise that he didn't leave the temple. He was an American devotee, born in America, but lived all of his life in Vrindavan. And when we came to visit him, he got up and wanted to offer us obeisances. This person dying. Devotees have spiritual pyramid of priorities. Prabhupada also on his deathbed wanted to go on Govardhan Parikrama. The devotees were like, that's insane. Prabhupada was skin and bones, but he wanted to do Parikrama. That's it that I can think of right now. All right, anything else?
One thought that I had during the lecture was, hell must be pretty full.
There's a waiting line.
Yeah. I would like to share something I experienced last month. I was invited to my older sister's birthday. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go because they're eating meat, drinking alcohol and so on in a restaurant. About 50 people around. But I decided to go. And when I saw my sister and her partner, I saw them eating 2 plates of 3 different kinds of meat, beef, pork, chicken. And when I saw that, I kind of, I had a vision I could see in the future. I saw my sister and her partner lying on their deathbeds in pain with tumors, and I don't know, it was an intense experience. And I was like, Lord, forgive them, they don't know what they are doing.
Yeah.
And I have one question. How long when a soul has to suffer, how long has it to suffer before it incarnates again?
Yeah, before it's thrown into another body.
Yeah.
As far as I get it, I mean, I vaguely remember Prabhupada making reference of few months.
Okay.
But you know, such statements don't have value in a sense that few months of what? Because time is very relative, you know. Like, for example, you dream for a few seconds. If you dream just for 1 minute, but you felt like you, in your dream, have had experiences for 10 years. So that really doesn't do much. But in terms of some principle, as far as I get it, this is the impression that I'm under, namely that you're in such experiences until you're being molded into what you need to be molded into, you know. Like if you're going to be thrown into body of a hog, you need to learn to love eating stool, for example. I'm making this up, but something like that, you know. And it's interesting that all traditions that believe God is a person have a concept of hell. And then, like, if you look at Catholicism, you know, over the years, they sort of tweaked their concept of hell like that. But it's there, you know. Like, Catholics have purgatory, you know. I mean, you said that, which was very kind of you, that God, please forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. But actually, all people who do evil, they don't know what they're doing. Because the moment they realize what they're doing, they can't do it anymore. Because you see, a person becomes so twisted and so morally corrupted that the person doesn't even understand that they're doing evil. Like Prabhupada gives that example of a boy and a frog. A boy is tossing rocks at the frog, and the frog says, "What the hell you're doing? I'm playing, but your playing is killing me. Do you get it?" And I've seen this when I was a soldier, since I mentioned now, you know. But I've seen boys, they're boys, you know, 19, 20, 21, 23, 25 at most. Be just normal people, but when you give them guns and you tell them that's the enemy, you can do anything you want to them, you'd be shocked what they do. Like it's insanity. I mean, at times I felt I wanted to kill my own people, soldiers on my side, you know. Because when you see that, you're like, why? Why? Because I can. And so moral education is such that you actually punish the person so that the person can associate hell with the activity they're doing. So they understand what's the nature of their act. I mean, if you think about it, the worst crime ever is not wanting to know the truth. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Ata, therefore, all these verses that begin Ata, Eva, these are all conclusive statements. Now they conclude something. So Ata, Atato Brahma, therefore, you should inquire about the absolute truth. And when you don't, then you become stupid. That's a crime. And it's interesting how sinful life feeds ignorance, and ignorance feeds sinful life. Srila Rupa Goswami said this. So, see, when you're sinful, more sinful you are, more ignorant you are. And more ignorant you are, more sinful you are. Then more sinful you are, more ignorant. Off, down you go. But you cannot blame ignorance. You know, it's like there is some inkling of, because we have freedom, free will, so we abuse that free will by actually wanting to be